Everybody. Hey, am I able to share my screen? I'm sorry, I'm kind of a newbie to Zoom. Or should I?
Yes, I just did that for you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Eh, I don't know how to do it. Let's see. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is just kind of a template we'll go through a little bit, just talking about the contract to close class here this evening. If you guys have any questions, please just ask them as we're going along. We're going to cover quite a bit of stuff here in a very short period of time. So when we're all done, if you guys have any questions for me, you've got my contact information there, and then I'll also provide it at the end. So here we go. So who I am is I'm an agent in the office of Keller Williams, Salt Lake City. I've been a licensed agent here since 2007. That's actually when the office opened. I do some classes in all three of the market centers here in the Salt Lake Valley. I'm super involved in the day-to-day at the office here and have been for a long time. I help the office broker review files for compliance as well. And what that has helped me is helped me just kind of grow better at what I'm doing. I've been a transaction coordinator my entire career. I don't actually close many of my own deals because I'm busy processing your guys' deals as agents out there representing buyers and sellers. I've closed a ton of transactions in my career and hoping to close many more before I'm done. Um, the great thing about what I do, and I really like it, is I help new agents like you guys get us help get established, help learn compliance, paperwork, best practices when writing an offer, and a lot of times that kind of works me. I work myself out of my own job because I've helped these agents grow from an individual agent. A lot of these people decide to start teams, and then they end up with their own transaction coordinator. I actually take a lot of pride in that because that means I was probably doing my job correctly. So that's just a brief summary of who I am. But here we go. Let's see. And I know you guys have probably been covered this little portion of it, but when you guys are ready to start writing an offer, it's very exciting, and it's also a little stressful, especially if it's your first one. You can certainly use me as a resource. Again, save my contact information. If you're out there on a Saturday going to an open house with a buyer and they decide they want to write an offer that Saturday, I'm most likely available to help you write the cleanest, accurate offer that you can. So, um, the first item on this slide here is just go slow. There are so many things, even if you're just writing a rep C, that's 6 pages, there's 25 sections in that rep C, and almost every single one of them has something that you need to check a box, put in a number. So just go slow because what happens is if you don't, and you send the offer to your client to sign, they sign it, and then you send it to the listing agent, that listing agent might not present your offer if you're missing some stuff. So just go slow, be patient. Again, it's super exciting and super stressful on your first couple. So the slower you go, the better. Less mistakes can happen. I fill in all the blanks when I'm writing an offer. If there's a spot there for a dollar amount, but there isn't a dollar amount needed, I actually put NA or I put zero. Just I'm kind of a compliance nerd, and I would hate for anyone to have an opportunity to possibly put something in there after it's already been signed. It's probably a little extra paranoia on my part, but it is what it is. Use the correct forms. I see a lot of agents, more so seasoned agents that make up their own language on, say, an addendum. for closing costs, just for an example. There's actually forms almost for every single thing that you need to do that have been created by attorneys that are available for us to use. And all those forms are available on the MLS. They're in your DocuSign. So use the correct forms. Number four, just make sure you're getting all the initials and signatures that you need to when you're sending that to your client, especially if you're doing it through DocuSign or some other online signature platform. Because what'll happen is if you miss an initial on page 4 of the rep C, eventually you're just going to have to get it again. And it kind of just, it's a pain, and it just kind of makes it look like you're missing things that are important. Once I have that offer signed by my client, you want to send that over to the listing agent with a pre-approval letter. If the buyer's paying cash, you'll probably want to include some sort of proof of funds that they have the cash. Again, I'm willing to help you guys when you get to that point. Use me as a resource because I'll help you make sure we're writing the strongest, most accurate offer possible. All right, on to we're actually under contract. You wrote the offer, you sent it to the listing agent, the seller accept. Super exciting, but now what do you do? So this next little bit, we'll go through what I do to ensure compliance and a smooth transaction. The first thing that your obligation is you want to get that earnest money right away. You have four days after acceptance to get that earnest money to your brokerage. Um, Personally, on the deals that I do when I represent a buyer, again, I don't do a lot. I actually have an earnest money conversation with my buyers before I even start showing them homes. And a lot of times I'll collect that earnest money check before we even have an accepted offer, and I'll just hold it in my office so I have it ready to go when we have an accepted offer. You don't have to do it that way. It's just an idea, because that is your actual first opportunity to put your buyers in contract default, because you have 4 calendar days um, after acceptance of the offer to get that delivered um, to your brokerage. Sorry, I was looking at a chat. Um, so earnest money, you want to get that right away. And then also you'll want to make sure you're sending the executed contract to your title company and to your lender, because those people are going to kind of talk behind the scenes. So I just conclude it all in one um, email. I just CC everybody so everybody's on the same page. We know who the players are, and everybody has a copy of the executed contract. One thing you have to remember is as you're going through this process of being under contract, you're going to have additional addendums pop up. You've got to make sure that you send those to the title company and lender as well. Because if you don't and you have an addendum 4, but the title company and lender only have up to addendum 3, that addendum 4 might have crucial information on it that the buyer or the lender and the title company need to ensure an accurate closing. So just make sure whenever you have something new executed, you're sending it to all the parties. I also include a copy of the MLS sheet when I send that out to the title company and lender, because that helps them pull tax records and things like that. Um, the next thing I do is I get all of the executed uh, contract documents into Command. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Command yet, but that's where we hold all of the executed documents once we're under contract, so that your broker could go in and actually look at what you have in there. So I put those into Command. You're going to want to track your contract deadlines because those are very important. Your job, I've always felt like your job as a buyer's agent, your number one job is to protect your buyer's earnest money. So those deadlines become super important. So however you track those, I would make sure you're putting them in some sort of a calendar. Uh, I'm assuming you guys aren't using like a paper calendar, but I put all the contract deadlines into my Google Calendar. And what I do is I give myself a 4-day cushion. So if my due diligence deadline is on Friday, on Tuesday, my computer's reminding me, hey, you've got a deadline coming up on Friday. That way I can make sure that I'm going to be able to do everything I need to do to meet those deadlines. Um, if you ask for a home warranty in the contract, order that right away, because what'll happen is if you don't, you'll be sitting at the closing table and the title person will be asking you, hey, did you order the home warranty invoice? And you don't want to be, or sorry, did you order the home warranty? And you don't want to be stressing about getting that ordered, because the title company needs a copy of that invoice so they can make sure that the home warranty gets paid for. So I always put a copy of that into command as well. So if I ever needed it, if the buyer called me 6 months later and said, hey, I think I got a home warranty, do you have that information? Instead of trying to track it down in my email, I can just go into command and grab that. And I actually do that with appraisals, home inspections, just so you have everything in one spot. Super easy to find that way. Is everyone good? Sorry, I'm not used to doing this via Zoom, so I hope it's making sense. All right, so the next thing you've got, your first contract deadline for the buyer is the due diligence deadline. Super important that you're on this right away. So you want to get that home inspection ordered. Personally, I've done it a lot of times where I've actually called my inspector before I even had an accepted contract, and I've just said, hey, I think we're going to go under contract. Can you get us on the schedule for, 2 days from now? That way, you're already having that set up. You can even let the listing agent know, hey, hopefully we get this under contract. If we do, FYI, I have a home inspection scheduled for Friday at 3 o'clock. Um, and that kind of shows the seller and the listing agent that you're really moving forward quickly. You're not going to, even if you have a 14-day due diligence deadline, you're not going to wait until day 10 to get the inspection done. Your job as the buyer's agent is you really want to keep the ball moving, um, because your next deadline is going to be your financing deadline. And typically, a lender will not order an appraisal until they know the inspection's good and you're not going to have to cancel for because of anything in the inspection. Um, so also know that with the inspections, there's a general home inspection, but there's also a lot of other things that you need to make sure you're educating your buyers on. So they could do a meth test, they could do a mold test, they can do a sewer scope. Anything that they feel is necessary, you've got to give them that information and just educate them. It's not your decision, it's their decision, but you're kind of the conduit to make sure that they have that information to make a smart decision. Obviously, all of those things cost money. So a general home inspection might cost $400, and then you start adding other things on top of that. It's going to increase the cost of that inspection. But again, that's the buyer's choice, not yours. So you're kind of educating them and letting them make that decision. Once you have that inspection set up, you want to make sure that you're letting the listing agent know so they can let the seller know, hey, on Friday at from 3 to 5, the buyer's going to be doing a home inspection. That's a very important step, and I've had agents learn the hard way. They forgot to let the seller know or the listing agent know so they could let the seller know. And then at Friday at 3 o'clock, an inspector shows up and the seller had no idea that that was happening. Not a huge deal, but again, the professionalism is what you're really hoping for throughout this entire process. So just make sure you're doing everything you need to do to ensure the process is smooth. Mistakes happen, but um, those things can be avoided again if you just slow down a little bit and you know you have the resources with the coaching with the transaction coordinator. They can help walk you through all of this stuff. So once the inspection's done, your inspector is going to actually, most of the time, they'll meet with the client, say the inspection's from 3 to 5. From 4:30 to 5, the inspector will meet with the buyer in person at the home and can go over the inspection findings directly with the buyer. I love this part of it. Every once in a while, a buyer can't go to the walkthrough, but I think this is an important part when they can because the inspector can go over the findings with the client, maybe point out anything that might be of a slight concern, and then that way the inspector's not telling you and then you're telling the buyer. You know, all that stuff can kind of get lost in translation. So that meeting at the end with the client and the inspector is a pretty good idea if you can make it happen. You'll get a copy of the inspection report as well. So your job at that point is to kind of go over the inspection findings with the buyer and ask them, are there any things that you want to ask for? Maybe repairs or uh, you can lower the purchase price in lieu of repairs. You can ask for closing costs. You can do a combination of all three. But again, that's up to your buyer. You can advise them, um, but you're their advocate, their agent, so you want to make sure you're doing what they want to do. Um, so once you get that report back, hopefully it's fairly clean. You know they're not going to cancel based on the inspection. It does happen, and that's okay. You just move on to you cancel and move on to the next property. But if you once you know that they don't want to cancel, you just need to reach out to the lender and say, "Hey, the inspection went well. Order the appraisal." Again, you're keeping the ball moving in this transaction. Um, Now, if the client does want to ask for repairs, you need to find out what those might be. Um, you want to kind of help them not be asking for nitpicky little things. I've seen it all. I've seen buyers want the toilet paper dispenser replaced in the downstairs bathroom. To me, that is not something you want to ask. You know, those are kind of things you do, your buyer would take care of after closing. For me as an agent, I'm looking at safety and hazard things. The roof has got a hole in it, or it appears the foundation's cracking, or there's some windows cracked in the basement. Those types of things are the types of things that personally I think are important because they might be big ticket items like a new furnace, AC. Um, those are the types of things that are higher ticket items that you don't want your clients to have to take care of post closing. So you might want to ask the seller to repair those items in order for your buyer to move forward. Now, with all that said, you're going to come across in your career times when the seller might be a 90-year-old person that doesn't have the resources or want to hire contractors or have people coming into their homes to replace those things. So you can have a discussion with the listing agent and say, hey, in lieu of the seller taking care of these repairs, we'd like to ask for $5,000 in closing costs or $5,000 price reduction on the purchase price. And all of those things can be asked for in the resolution of due diligence addendum. Again, going back to my earlier point, use the forms that are provided for you. There's no sense for you taking a blank addendum and using your own language to explain something that there's actually an addendum for where you're just filling in the blanks. So the resolution of due diligence addendum has pretty much three options on it. You can reduce the purchase price, you can ask for closing costs, or you can ask for repairs. Again, you could do a combo of all three. I rarely see that, but it can be done. Um, but that form literally just says, basically in lieu of repairs, we want you to reduce the purchase price from 500 to 495. Everyone signs it and you move on. So look at that addendum when you have a chance and just kind of get a little bit familiar with it, because that's what you should be using. Again, we're not attorneys, so why would you take a blank addendum and make up your own words? So let's just say at this point we're past due diligence, everything's moving forward. Great. Now we're on to our next part of the contract and a deadline is the financing and appraisal deadline. And my first sentence here, this is one of the things you have very little control over because you can't order the appraisal, you can't run credit for your clients, you can't gather their work documents. That's all things that go through the lender. Oh, somebody's asking where that addendum's at. If you go to I use all my forms on the MLS. So if you go into the MLS forms section and there's a search bar kind of to the top left once you're in there, if you type the word resolution, I think only one addendum pops up and it's called the resolution of due diligence addendum. So the one thing you can do in the financing thing is you just need to stay in communication with the lender. If I ask the lender to go ahead and order the appraisal on Monday, a couple days later, I'm going to start asking, hey, is that appraisal ordered? And I'm going to keep asking him, maybe not every single day, but probably every other day until he or she tells me that addend or that appraisal has been ordered. Because again, you can't control that except for the fact that you can stay in communication with your lender. You really want to develop relationships with these people, lenders, title companies, home warranty people, inspectors, because you want to find people that you really like to work with and that you know you can count on. Because it can be a little frustrating when you get with a lender or a title company or a home inspector that is really not good at communicating because this business is all about communication. And if one part of the team's not doing their part and not getting back to you, it can be very frustrating. So right now, you don't know who those people are because if you haven't done any deals, you don't know who you should be using. But obviously, you can ask your coaches, you can ask your transaction coordinator, other agents in the office. And what I would do if I was new again is, and this is what I did when I started, is I met with several different ones because I want to find people I like to work with as people, but then you also want to make sure they're good at their job. One of my best friends is a lender, and I don't like when he works on my deals because he's not the best communicator. But you won't know that stuff until you get out there and start meeting people. Lenders and title companies love to take new agents to lunch. That's one way to meet those people, but until you get in a deal with them, you're really not going to know how good they are unless you have recommendations from other people. So also know that depending on what type of financing your buyer's getting, oh, sorry, dang it. Oh boy. Sorry, hold on. Sorry, I don't normally do this via Zoom, so I'm a little frazzled. Um, know that depending on what type of financing your buyer's getting, the appraisal process is a little bit different from a conventional financed buyer to, say, an FHA buyer. An appraiser they're still obviously determining value, but they're also looking for safety issues. So, just for small example's sake, let's say there's broken windows in the basement and the stairs going down to the basement doesn't have a hand railing to it. An appraiser's going to flag those things and make those things get repaired prior to fully signing off on the appraisal. So you need to make sure if that's the case, if you have an FHA buyer and the appraiser says, hey, I've done my appraisal and it's contingent on, hold on, let me admit this person. It's contingent on those repairs being done. You need to coordinate to make sure that those appraisal required repairs are getting done. And how you do that is you say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Listing Agent, appraisal's back. The appraiser needs to have that broken window in the basement fixed, and they need to have that hand railing installed in this to the stairs going downstairs. Those items are actually pretty easy fixes, but again, you need to make sure that they're getting done because that appraiser will have to re-inspect the property to make sure that those things are done before he will sign off on the appraisal. And that's part of the financing and appraisal deadline is the buyer has to be fully approved for financing and their appraisal has to be done. And this is your last opportunity to pull out of the contract and protect your buyer's earnest money. If you go past this deadline, um, and all of a sudden the lender says, oh, they don't qualify, we can't close, you're going to be forfeiting that buyer's earnest money to the seller. So again, back to contract deadlines on your calendar, you really want to watch those. I reiterate this every time I do this class because again, your job is to protect that buyer's earnest money. And I don't know about you guys, but if there's $10,000 of earnest money on the line, personally, if I lost $10,000, I would be freaking financially devastated and emotionally devastated. So you want to make sure that you're watching those deadlines. If you're financing an appraisal deadlines on Friday and on Thursday the lender's like, I don't know if we're going to have the appraisal back by Friday at 5. I would immediately prepare an addendum extending that deadline to probably Monday. You'd have your buyer sign it, you send it to the listing agent, and the seller will sign it. And the thing is, it's not fun to ask for deadlines extensions, but if you're this close to settlement, because we're almost to settlement at this point, the buyer isn't going to want you to cancel because the seller isn't going to want you to cancel because then they're going to have to start this whole process over with a new buyer. So you want to make sure that you're protecting that earnest money is my point. Um, so now let's just say the appraisal's back, everything's good, buyer's financing is done, and then the lender emails, calls you, tells you, hey, good news, we're clear to close. Those are the greatest words you're going to hear when you represent a buyer, because at that point, I feel all of the hard work is kind of done. And now it's just a matter of setting up uh, the settlement, which is our next little spot here. So this is a point I like to make. You're going to make a mistake on this all the time. It's not a big mistake, but I still do it sometimes. You'll ask an agent friend, "Hey, where are you headed to?" "Oh, I'm going to a closing." No, you're actually going to settlement. Settlement and closing are two different things. Settlement, and this it's important and especially important for the buyer to understand because a lot of times if you don't educate your buyer and you go to settlement to sign the settlement documents, your buyer, I've had situations where I heard buyers thought they were getting the keys literally right then, and that's not how it works. It works by first off, however you wrote possession in the contract, which I believe is section paragraph 4 of the Rep C, there's different choices. So if you wrote possession to be 48 hours after closing, your clients aren't going to get the keys to that property and be able to take possession until 48 hours after closing happens. And again, settlement and closing are two different things. Settlement is the act of going and signing the closing documents. Closing is when the property funds and records with the county, and the title company will tell you when that happens. It's important to remember that, again, if you have settlement on a Friday at noon, there most likely that property is not going to fund and record that day. And because it's Friday, it's not going to fund and record until Monday. So you want to make sure you're being careful when you're writing that rep C, like I mentioned earlier, because if it's me on the closing section, paragraph 4 of the rep C, there's a box that you can mark that says upon closing. That's what I would do unless the listing agent told me the sellers need 72 hours after settlement to get out. But normally I would be marking that box as upon closing. And I also would be scheduling my settlement dates on, say, a Wednesday, if possible, because if you go to settlement on Wednesday, even if you do it late at night, like 5 or 6, it's definitely not going to record and fund on Wednesday, but for sure it will on Thursday, unless for whatever reason there was some hiccup. It's going to on Friday. I've actually never had a situation where that's happened. But again, you want to be able to get those keys for your clients because most people are going to be able to move on a weekend. So if you settle on Friday and your client thinks that they're going to be able to get the keys on Friday, they're going to have scheduled moving trucks, got their friends ready to help. And I have had situations where clients got into that situation where literally those people had moving stuff ready to go for Saturday and they couldn't do it because they didn't get to take possession until Monday. So again, just these detail things, I know it probably sounds scary and stressful, but as long as you're just being diligent when you're writing your offer and you're staying on top of those deadlines, you probably aren't going to have any problems. Um, so you want to schedule the signing, the settlement for something that's convenient for everybody. Obviously, your client, the person in the title company that facilitates the signing, and a lot of times the loan officer will show up as well because that buyer is their client too. So you kind of want to coordinate that just at a time that's convenient for everybody. Um, Number 3 on here is you want to review the settlement statement prior to your buyer signing. And what I mean by that is if I'm signing on Wednesday, or if my settlement deadline's on Wednesday, on Monday or Tuesday, I'm going to start bothering the title company and ask for a copy of the settlement statement because at that point, they should have all the numbers that they need. I want to review that settlement statement before I even go to settlement, just to make sure it's accurate, because if changes have to be made during settlement, that's just going to prolong the process and it kind of makes everybody look like they don't know what they're doing. So I always review that settlement statement prior to going to settlement. Usually it's always accurate, but if something's missing, you need to be able to catch it. There's a lot of things on there that you're not going to understand, like city taxes and somebody owes the sewer company. Those aren't your concerns. Your concerns are purchase price, if there should be closing costs in there, if you ask for the seller to pay for a home warranty, you want to be able to see all of those things and make sure they match the contract that everybody has executed. Because once that settlement is signed, those corrections are very hard to be made. So you go to settlement with a buyer, it can take usually, an hour. Sorry. Usually can take about an hour with a buyer. If it's an FHA or VA buyer, it might take a little bit longer. But the cool thing about settlement as an agent is you're kind of a rock star. You got these people into their first home. Maybe it's their, forever home, or it's a first time home buyer. that didn't think they were going to be able to buy something. You got them into it. I love going to settlement, and I love it because of that, but also because I knew I reviewed that settlement statement ahead of time, and so I can just sit there and, cheer on my client. Um, so settlements happened, and you just found out from the title company the property's funded and recorded, and now it belongs to your buyer. So before that happens, I'm having a conversation with the listing agent just saying, "Hey, we're signing on Wednesday. I think we'll fund and record on Thursday. How can I get my buyers the keys?" The easiest way, if I'm a listing agent, I'm going to leave my super key box on the front door or wherever it was at and leave the key inside so the buyer's agent can just go over there, get the key out of the key box, and get inside the house. And usually the seller will leave extra keys, garage door openers, and things like that on the kitchen counter. If your seller, if the listing agent already takes the key box off, you're going to have to coordinate how you're going to get the keys. But I would assume it's easier I would love if the buyer's agent just got the key off out of the Supra and then I'll remove the Supra later. But and then you just obviously need to coordinate getting those keys to your client. Um, let's see. All right, we're almost done. And again, I apologize. I'm not used to doing this on Zoom. This usually takes me a lot longer because I'm actually see people and talking. So we're almost done. So working with the transaction coordinator, um, I would highly recommend it. And obviously, I'm a transaction coordinator, so it's easy for me to say that. But what it does for you, and you're going to hear this word a lot in your business and in your career, is it leverages you. Because what happens is all of those things that we just talked about over say a 30-day period, they take a lot of time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you have to do. We just talked about it in say 40 minutes, but it takes a long time. And for you as an agent, I'm assuming you didn't get into the business to push paperwork around. You're probably a people person and you want to be out there showing homes and writing contracts and meeting people. A transaction coordinator is kind of the opposite of that. I'm a paperwork geek and I love what I do. And to be able to team up with an agent, uh, it just helps everybody. Um, and as a transaction coordinator, a good one will do pretty much almost everything we just talked about for you. Um, I do probably 90% of what we just talked about for my clients. They hire me, we go under contract, and I kind of take over that whole under contract process for them. They're obviously super involved still because they're still the agent. Transaction coordinators, they don't really do any negotiating of repairs or things like that, or um, they help you be compliant, make it as smooth as possible, and they allow you to hopefully generate new business. So, once you get a deal under contract and it closes, if you don't have another deal going or working with other clients, you're essentially unemployed again. So the leverage piece is huge because you've got something under contract, it's in good hands, but it allows you to, whatever your ideal prospecting thing is. I know agents that love cold calling. I wouldn't be able to do it. I know agents that love door knocking neighborhoods. I definitely wouldn't be able to do that. But they're super successful at those things because they found that niche that they enjoyed and they get business out of it. But if they're bogged down with contract work, they're not going to be able to do those things to generate more business. Um, and just, be aware I'm not the only transaction coordinator out there. There's a lot. I work with a lot of them on deals. I think one of the things that separates me from that is I'm not an employee at Keller Williams. I started this business in 2007. I have a real estate license at Keller Williams, but the office doesn't pay me to do this. You guys as agents pay me, but I don't charge you anything until we close the deal. I charge $350 a transaction. If the deal fails, we just move on to the next one. I don't charge you anything. I don't get paid till you get paid. And I think that's important to understand. And it's also important to understand that a lot of the transaction coordinators out there, they may work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I completely understand that real estate doesn't happen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 all the time. So I'm available, not obviously all the time, but a lot of the time because, again, this is my own business. And if your deals aren't closing, you're not making money. I'm not making money, so I have a vested interest in your success. Um, so I think, is that it? Let's see. Yes, congratulations. I hope that was okay. Again, I'm not used to doing it via sorry, I'm looking at a chat. Yep, good point. Good point, Amber. Yeah, so if your buyer wants to ask for repairs, you know, communicate that with the listing agent. Hey, they want you to fix this, this, and this. And if the listing agent says, yes, seller agrees to that, then write up that addendum because Amber is a good point. You don't want to be, hey, here's 15 things you to repair and put that in an addendum. And then because the seller's going to counter that and say, no, we'll do this, 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 and this. It's just creating more paperwork. So, Amber, great point. It's way better to be able to get those things verbally communicated and then put it into an addendum. So, I appreciate your guys' time. Again, keep my contact info. I'm here for you if you need me. Did anyone have any other questions? All right.
Nope,
Thanks,
thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.